You know what's funny? People always act shocked when someone finally stops pretending to be happy with less than they deserve. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy my videos, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. So, I'm 28, my name's Madison, and until recently, I thought I knew exactly what my life was supposed to look like. Ryan and I had been together for 5 years, married for 3 of those. He's 30, works in some technical field that pays well enough for us to have our little starter home with the white picket fence dream. The thing is, dreams can start feeling like cages when you're the one stuck inside them. Ryan wasn't what you'd call simple. He had this way of being intense about everything. When he got into something, whether it was reorganizing our garage or planning our weekend, he'd dive in completely. It was attractive at first, that focus, that dedication, but lately it felt suffocating. He'd plan out our entire Saturday morning over coffee, mapping out grocery runs and errands like we were coordinating some military operation. And God forbid I suggested we just wing it for once. The worst part was how he handled money. I mean, sure, he made more than me, but the way he'd casually pick up dinner tabs or insist on paying for everything made me feel like some kept woman. I had my own job, my own account that I kept separate because I needed something that was just mine. But then he'd get that look when I'd buy something for myself. Not disapproving exactly, more like he was calculating whether I was contributing my fair share to the household. It made my skin crawl. Between us, I started feeling like I was disappearing into this life we'd built. My friends from college were traveling, getting promotions, living in actual cities with real culture. Meanwhile, I was stuck in suburbia watching Ryan alphabetize his tool collection. Heading over to Marcus's summer gathering, I practically jumped at the chance. Marcus had always thrown the best parties back in college, the kind where anything could happen. Ryan seemed excited too, which should have been sweet, but honestly just annoyed me more. He bought this new navy shirt because I'd once mentioned it brought out his eyes. The fact that he remembered something so small and tried so hard just made me feel guilty and resentful at the same time. Like, why couldn't he put that energy into being more spontaneous, more exciting? The day of the party, I spent extra time getting ready. I told myself it was just because I hadn't seen some of these people in months, but looking back, I was already preparing for something. I chose this fitted black dress that hugged in all the right places, did my makeup a little smokier than usual. Ryan complimented me, of course, but in that careful way married men do. Appreciative, but not too appreciative, like he was worried about seeming possessive. When we got to Marcus's place, it was exactly what I needed. Music, laughter, people who remembered when I was fun instead of just Ryan's wife. I grabbed a glass of wine and started making rounds, feeling more like myself than I had in months. Ryan stuck close at first, doing his usual thing of knowing exactly what everyone was drinking and making sure I had everything I needed. Sweet, but clingy. That's when Dominic walked in. Look, I'm not going to pretend it was some cosmic moment or anything, but there was definitely something about him that made the whole room shift. He had this confidence that filled up space, not loud or obnoxious, just present. Expensive clothes that fit perfectly, the kind of watch that cost more than our mortgage payment. When he laughed, people turned to see what was funny. When he talked, you found yourself leaning in. I noticed him notice me. It was electric in a way I'd forgotten relationships could be. Ryan was across the room talking baseball with Marcus, completely oblivious to the way Dominic's eyes kept finding mine across the crowd. Part of me felt guilty for the flutter in my stomach, but a bigger part felt alive for the first time in ages. Dominic made his way over eventually, introducing himself with that perfect smile. He worked in finance, traveled constantly, had just gotten back from some deal in Europe. Everything about him screamed success and sophistication, the exact opposite of Ryan's comfortable, predictable world. When Dominic asked what I did for work, he actually listened to my answer instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. When I mentioned feeling stuck in our small town, he got this knowing look, like he understood exactly what I meant. The conversation flowed so easily. He told stories about cities I'd only dreamed of visiting, restaurants I'd seen on travel shows, the kind of life that felt impossibly glamorous from where I was standing. And the whole time, he made me feel like I belonged in that world, like I was wasting my potential, settling for less. Ryan tried to join us once, appearing at my elbow with that territorial smile husbands get when they sense competition. The contrast was painful. Where Dominic was polished and worldly, Ryan looked exactly like what he was, a suburban guy in a new shirt trying too hard. When Dominic mentioned his recent trip to Monaco, Ryan's contribution was some story about our weekend trip to the lake. I wanted to disappear. But Dominic was smooth about it, including Ryan just enough to be polite while making it clear the real conversation was with me. He had this way of making me feel special, chosen, like he saw something in me that my own husband missed. When Ryan finally drifted away, Dominic moved closer, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that makes you feel like you're sharing secrets. The wine was flowing, the music was perfect, and for the first time in years, I felt desired instead of just comfortable. Dominic wasn't looking at me like I was a sure thing, like I was already his. He was looking at me like I was a prize worth winning. The attention was intoxicating. As the evening went on, Dominic got bolder, light touches on my arm when he made a point, standing just close enough that I could smell his cologne. He talked about spontaneous trips, about living life on your own terms, about not settling for mediocrity. Every word felt like a direct criticism of the life I'd built with Ryan. The turning point came when Marcus's neighbors started complaining about the noise. Dominic rolled his eyes and made some comment about small-town mentality, how some people were content to live small lives in small places. Then he looked right at me and said something that stopped my heart. "You seem like someone who appreciates a more exciting pace. I could show you what that looks like. I could give you a better life than this." He said it like a joke, but his eyes were dead serious. And something inside me just snapped. All the resentment I'd been swallowing for months, all the frustration with Ryan's careful planning and suburban dreams, it all came rushing up at once. I laughed, this sharp, bright sound that cut through the party noise. The whole group went quiet, and I could feel Ryan's eyes on me from across the patio. But instead of feeling embarrassed or backing down, I felt powerful, reckless. "Anywhere but here is a better life," I heard myself say, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. The words hung in the air like a bomb. I could see Ryan's face go slack with shock, could feel the entire party watching us like we were dinner theater. But I wasn't done. 5 years of biting my tongue, of pretending to be grateful for a life that felt like a cage, and I was finally telling the truth. I looked directly at Ryan, my husband of 3 years, the man who loved me enough to buy a shirt because I once said it brought out his eyes. "You're suffocating, Ryan. A comfortable, safe, suffocating man who thinks planning grocery runs counts as romance." The silence was complete. You could hear ice melting in glasses. Marcus looked like someone had punched him. Dominic's smirk was pure victory. But I wasn't finished. The wine and the attention and years of buried resentment had me feeling untouchable. "You know what's pathetic? You bought that shirt because you thought it would make me happy. Like new clothes could fix how fundamentally dull you are." Ryan just stood there, not saying a word. His face was completely still, like he was processing something too big to understand. Part of me wanted him to fight back, to show some fire, to prove he had passion somewhere inside him, but he just stared at me with these empty eyes, and I felt nothing but contempt. I turned back to Dominic, who was watching the whole thing like it was entertainment. "Let's get out of this dump," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Dominic offered his arm like we were leaving the opera instead of destroying my marriage in front of all our friends. As we walked through the stunned crowd toward his car, I felt this rush of freedom I hadn't experienced since college. I was finally doing something spontaneous, something that felt real and alive instead of safe and planned. I didn't look back at Ryan. I didn't want to see his face. Didn't want anything to spoil this moment of pure rebellion. Dominic's car was everything Ryan's wasn't. Sleek, expensive, fast. As we pulled away from Marcus's house, I felt like I was finally escaping the life that had been slowly suffocating me. Dominic took me to this upscale hotel downtown, the kind of place Ryan would have researched for weeks before booking. Everything was perfect. Champagne, city lights, the feeling that I was finally living instead of just existing. Dominic made me feel sophisticated, desired, like I was the kind of woman who belonged in places like this. We spent the night talking about all the places he could take me, the life we could build together. He painted pictures of European weekends and Broadway shows, of a world where money wasn't something you worried about, but something you enjoyed. For the first time in years, I felt like I was with someone who matched my ambitions instead of holding me back. The next morning felt like waking up in a different life. Dominic ordered room service without looking at prices, talked casually about his upcoming business trips like I'd naturally be included. I let myself imagine what it would be like to be with someone who thought big, who didn't need to plan every detail in advance. But then his phone started ringing and ringing. Dominic kept declining calls, getting more agitated each time. When he finally answered, his whole demeanor changed. The confident, worldly man from the night before was suddenly defensive, almost panicked. I could only hear his side of the conversation, but it was enough. "Babe, I can explain, and it's not what you think. And finally, how did you get this number?" When he hung up, the mask was completely off. Dominic wasn't the sophisticated finance guy who could show me the world. He was just another cheating loser, and apparently not even a successful one. The expensive clothes were leased, the stories were exaggerated, and the girlfriend who'd been calling was driving down from the city to confront him. The whole fantasy crumbled in about 10 minutes. Dominic went from romantic lead to pathetic fraud so fast it gave me whiplash. When I asked about all his promises, about the life he'd described, he actually laughed. "Come on, you didn't really think this was serious, did you? It was fun, but I'm not looking for complications." Complications. That's what I was to him. A fun distraction from his real life. The same way Ryan had probably become a comfortable routine I wanted to escape from. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I was too angry and humiliated to appreciate it. No, before I continue with what happened next, if you're finding this story as devastating as it felt to live through, please hit that like button, drop a comment telling me your thoughts, and subscribe to help a small creator like me keep sharing these real, raw stories. Because what comes next is going to show you just how badly one night can change everything. Dominic's girlfriend arrived while I was still getting dressed, and the confrontation was everything you'd expect from a woman who just discovered her boyfriend's cheating. She called him every name in the book, most of which he deserved, and a few that applied to me too. When she was done destroying him verbally, she took his car keys and left him stranded at the hotel, which meant I was stranded too. I had to call a rideshare to get home, sitting in the back of a stranger's car while trying to process how completely I'd destroyed my life for a man who turned out to be a complete fraud. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, probably wondering why I looked like I was attending my own funeral. The house was empty when I got home. Ryan's car was gone, and the silence felt different from the comfortable quiet I'd grown tired of. This was the hollow silence of abandonment. Of consequences. I called his name anyway, hoping maybe he'd just gone for coffee, but I knew better. His clothes were gone from the closet, not all of them. He'd only taken what he needed, like he was planning to come back for the rest later, or maybe he just couldn't stand to be in our bedroom long enough to pack properly. The bathroom was missing his toothbrush, his razor, all the little things that make a space feel shared. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried texting, keeping it casual at first, like maybe we could just talk this through, but the messages showed as delivered, never read. He'd blocked me completely. The reality of what I'd done started sinking in slowly, like cold water rising. I'd destroyed my marriage in front of all our friends for a man who'd used me and thrown me away in less than 24 hours. The life I'd been so eager to escape was gone, and I had nothing to show for it but humiliation. I spent the rest of that day calling everyone I could think of who might know where Ryan was staying. Marcus wouldn't even take my calls. Brittany, who'd been my maid of honor, told me she needed time to process what she had witnessed. Even Claire, who'd never particularly liked Ryan, said she couldn't get involved. It was like I'd been erased from my own social circle overnight. These people who'd been my friends for years were suddenly treating me like a stranger, like someone they'd rather not associate with. The worst part was understanding why. What I'd done was so cruel, so public, that nobody wanted to be seen supporting it. Days passed without a word from Ryan. I kept expecting him to come home, to want to talk things through, to fight for our marriage, but there was just silence. His absence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. It was the sound of someone walking away completely, of giving up instead of trying to fix things. I started leaving voicemails, long, rambling messages where I tried to explain what had happened, how Dominic had manipulated me, how sorry I was, but they felt hollow even as I was saying them. How do you explain that you destroyed your marriage because you were bored? How do you apologize for humiliating someone you claim to love in front of everyone they cared about? The silence stretched into weeks. I'd drive by places I thought Ryan might be, his gym, his favorite coffee shop, the office building where he worked, but I never saw him, and I started to wonder if he'd left town entirely. Maybe he was staying with family in another state, starting over somewhere I couldn't find him. Our friends made their choice clear through their absence. Nobody called to check on me. Nobody invited me to anything. Nobody seemed interested in hearing my side of the story. I'd gone from being part of a couple, part of a social group, to being completely isolated in the space of a few weeks. The house felt like a museum of my former life. Ryan's coffee mug still in the dishwasher, his books still on the nightstand, the vacation photos we'd never gotten around to putting in albums. Everything reminded me of what I'd thrown away, but I couldn't bring myself to pack it up or throw it out. I kept replaying that night at Marcus's party, trying to understand what had possessed me to be so cruel. The wine was part of it, and Dominic's attention, but mostly it was years of resentment I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I'd felt trapped by Ryan's love, suffocated by his consistency, bored by his devotion. But now that it was gone, I couldn't remember why those things felt like problems instead of gifts. 2 months after that night, I finally saw Ryan, not because I'd been looking for him, but because he came back to the house while I was at work. I knew he had been there because some of his remaining clothes were gone, and he'd left his key on the kitchen counter. No note, no message, just the key sitting there like a period at the end of a sentence. That's when I knew it was really over, not just paused or complicated, but finished. Ryan wasn't coming back to fight for us or demand explanations. He was simply removing himself from my life as completely as possible, taking only what belonged to him and leaving everything else behind. I tried one more time to reach him, showing up at his office building and waiting in the parking lot like some kind of stalker. When he finally appeared, walking to his car with a confidence I didn't remember him having, I almost lost my nerve. He looked different, not broken or devastated like I'd expected, but calm, resolved. "Ryan, please," I called out, hurrying across the parking lot. "We need to talk." He stopped and turned to face me, but his expression was completely neutral. Not angry, not hurt, just distant, like I was a stranger asking for directions. "There's nothing to discuss, Madison," he said quietly. "You made your feelings clear." I started to explain about Dominic, about how he'd lied to me, how I'd been manipulated and used, but Ryan held up a hand to stop me. "I know about Dominic," he said. "Everyone knows, but that doesn't change what you said to me, or how you said it." The calm in his voice was worse than shouting would have been. This wasn't the Ryan I'd married, the one who'd get upset when I was 10 minutes late or who'd want to talk through every disagreement until we reached resolution. This was someone who'd moved past caring about my reasons or my regrets. I was drunk, I said, hating how desperate I sounded. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did, he replied simply. You meant every word. You just didn't expect there to be consequences. He got in his car and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot like the fool I'd become. That was the last time we spoke directly. Everything else went through lawyers, the divorce papers, the division of assets, the end of everything we'd built together. The divorce was finalized 8 months after that night at Marcus's party. 8 months from thinking I was trapped in a dull marriage to being completely alone, with nothing to show for my rebellion but regret and isolation. Ryan got the house. I couldn't afford the mortgage without his income, and I didn't fight it. I moved into a small apartment across town, the kind of place I'd lived in college before I had someone to share expenses with. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Ryan was doing well. He'd gotten involved in some community activities, was traveling more for work, seemed genuinely happy. Nobody mentioned whether he was dating anyone, but I got the impression that he was moving forward with his life while I was still stuck in the wreckage of mine. The isolation was the hardest part. I'd lost not just my husband, but my entire social network. All the couple friends who didn't know how to maintain relationships with both of us. Marcus never spoke to me again after that night. Brittany would respond to texts, but never initiated contact. I was persona non grata in my own life. I tried dating, but it felt pointless. Every man I met was either looking for something casual or reminded me of what I'd lost with Ryan. The excitement I'd craved, the spontaneity that seemed so important, felt empty without someone who actually cared about me to share it with. She'd been at Marcus's party that night, had witnessed the whole disaster. I braced myself for awkwardness, but she was surprisingly kind. "How are you doing, Madison?" she asked, and she seemed to genuinely want to know. "Fine," I lied, because what else do you say? That you destroyed your life for a fantasy and now you spend most evenings alone in a studio apartment eating takeout and wondering how you got so lost? "I saw Ryan last month," she said carefully, "at that new restaurant downtown. He looked really good." I waited for her to mention whether he was alone, but she didn't offer that information, and I was too proud to ask. After she walked away, I stood in the cereal aisle and cried for the first time since the divorce was finalized. Look, I know what people think about what I did. I know I'm the woman who publicly humiliated her husband and threw away a good marriage for a man who turned out to be a fraud. I know I'm the cautionary tale wives tell each other about what happens when you take a good man for granted. But here's what nobody talks about. How suffocating it felt to be so completely known, so predictably loved. Ryan never surprised me, never challenged me, never made me feel like I had to earn his affection. It was comfortable and safe, and absolutely soul-crushing in its reliability. Maybe I should have talked to him about feeling trapped instead of acting out so destructively. Maybe I should have suggested counseling or a trial separation or any of the mature solutions adults use when their marriages hit rough patches. But I didn't want to work on it. I wanted to escape it. And Dominique offered me exactly that, a kind of escape. The fact that he turned out to be a liar doesn't change how I felt in that hotel room, how alive and desired and free I felt for those few hours. It doesn't excuse what I did to Ryan, but it explains why I did it. I was drowning in predictability, and Dominique threw me a lifeline to somewhere more exciting. Now I'm 30, divorced, and starting over in ways I never planned for. My apartment is small, but it's mine. My job covers my bills, but doesn't leave much extra. My social life consists mainly of work acquaintances and the occasional awkward coffee with old friends who don't quite know how to act around me anymore. Ryan kept the life we built together, the house, the friends, the comfortable routines I'd found so stifling, and apparently he's thriving in it. Maybe he found someone who appreciates his consistency instead of resenting it. Maybe he learned to be more spontaneous. Or maybe he just found someone who doesn't need constant excitement to feel alive. I tell myself I'm better off, that I needed to blow up my life to figure out who I really am. Some days, I even believe it. But most days, I just feel like I traded something real for something that was never there to begin with. And now I'm too proud to admit I might have made the biggest mistake of my life. The truth is, I miss him. Not just the security or the companionship, but him specifically. The way he'd get excited about small things, how he always remembered what I liked, how he loved me consistently even when I didn't deserve it. I miss being someone's priority, someone's person, someone's choice every single day. But I can't take back what I said or how I said it. I can't undo the public humiliation or the private cruelty. I can't make Dominic into the man I thought he was, and I can't make myself into someone who deserved Ryan's devotion. So I'm learning to live with the consequences of choosing excitement over stability, fantasy over reality, the unknown over the known. Some lessons you can only learn by losing everything, and this is mine. Whether it makes me a better person or just a lonelier one remains to be seen.